Welcome to Chapter 2, where you'll start learning about HTML. Before I start this lesson, I just wanted to let you know, if I go too fast or too slow, just adjust the playback speed of this video. It is important that you don't skip anything, as I'll be teaching a lot of concepts that may be short and you may miss. So without further ado, let's get started. What does HTML stand for? It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Well, you may have heard of XML, GML, and HTML. Each of these are You may have heard of XML, which stands for Extensible Markup Language, GML, which is Generalized Markup Language, and HTML, which is Hypertext Markup Language. Well, what is this markup language that I keep stating? Well, markup used to be put into manuscripts, where editors used to mark up the manuscript or specify changes, for example, bold. HTML works in a similar way, where you can add HTML tags and mark up a document. Now that we know what HTML stands for, let's take a look at what an HTML boilerplate is. An HTML boilerplate is the basic code that most websites need. But why is this piece of code called a boilerplate? Printing press used to use heavy iron plates like this one that used to function as a printing template. Because this looked very similar to the small metal plates that identified builders of a steam boiler, people thought it would be a good idea to call the basic layout of an HTML file a boilerplate. So that's why it is called a boilerplate. It kind of makes sense now. So let's go ahead and start breaking down the boilerplate. That way we understand every single line. This first line of code from the HTML boilerplate would tell the browser what type of file it is reading. And it's basically telling it it's reading an HTML file. But this also tells something else. It also tells the browser that we are using HTML5, not HTML4, 3, or etc. We're using the newest version of HTML, which is HTML5. But if you want to see an example of declaring the doc type for HTML4, this is how it would look, the first line. As we can see, it is extremely long. Now let's take a look at what these two highlighted tags are. So these two highlighted tags tell the browser that all the HTML code we will write is going to be in between these two tags. So what are HTML tags? Tags allow us to add structure to the website. For example, adding text on the screen. But before we continue, let's go ahead and break it down. There are two types of HTML tags. There are singular tags and paired tags. So a singular tag is basically a greater than sign and then the code in between and then a less than sign. And a paired tag is one set of greater than less than sign and then another set of greater than less than sign. And then basically, usually there's a lot of text in between them, which you'll learn in a few minutes. So let's go ahead and deconstruct a singular tag. As we can see, for this line of code, the opening tag is on the left and the closing tag is on the right. We have a tag name, we have an attribute, and we have an attribute value. So let's go ahead and deconstruct this singular tag. On the left side, we have an opening of a tag, and on the right side, we have a closing of a tag. And meta is a tag name, and then we have an attribute, and then we have an attribute value. Basically, an attribute is something that belongs to the tag name that we change. But we'll get into this later, so you don't really have to worry right now. So let's go ahead and deconstruct a paired tag. Note the opening tags and closing tags. So on the left, we have a tag name, and on the right, we have the ending of the tag name. And you want to really focus on the /. And we can see that's the beginning and ending. And anything in between these two tags will do something special, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. We know that these two tags are paired tags and specify that the code in between them is HTML. Let's move on to the next part, the head tags. The head tags is where you can specify and provide information to the browser so that specific actions can take place. But most of this is often not displayed in the body itself. So some of the code that could be put in between these two head tags includes the name of the tab, tell the browser what our website contains, and tell the web how to encode our HTML text, and much, much more. Now let's move on to the next set of tags. And this is a singular tag. And in this, we have meta charset is equal to UTF-8. So charset is basically the character encoding type, and UTF-8 is encoder. And UTF-8 is basically the most popular encoder that is across the web. And we will be using this for the rest of our websites. And it will help our browser render all the correct information onto our site without any issues. Next, the title tag is a paired tag in which we can tell the browser what name to display on the tab. And we'll take a look into this in a few moments. Let's move on to the next part, which is a body tag. The body tag is where we will add the code to the website so that it displays text, buttons, inputs, tables, and much more on our website. Now that we understand the boilerplate, let's move on to some other HTML that wasn't in the boilerplate because it's basically not always used. First, let's talk about the header tags. The header tag is a paired tag in which we can put words so it gets displayed into text. There are 6 types of header tags: H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and finally H6. And here is a way of writing it in HTML code. As we can see, it is a paired tag, and we could see it in exact syntax. So before I move on, let's go ahead and actually write this code for ourselves so we can see in our browser. So first, I'm just going to minimize this so I could get out of here. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder on my desktop. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to click on new and then folder. And I'm going to go ahead and call this folder web dev. I'm going to double click on this folder. And I'm going to go ahead and create another folder. And I'm going to call this lesson 1, or not even that. I could even become more specific. I'll call this HTML. And then in here, I'll call this folder lesson 1. And finally in here, I'm just going to double click on it. And that's all I got to do. Next, we're going to open up Atom. So I'm just going to search up Atom. And it will open up. And this is what should show up. And we're just going to press on X and X, X, and X. And from here, what we're going to do is basically add this folder in here. So we just dragged it in. And as we can see that this shows up. Now we could go ahead and drop this down and drop this down, but there's no file in here. We're going to go ahead and create a file in this lesson 1 folder. We're going to right click. We're going to click on new file. And here I'm going to call this index.html. You can call it whatever, but the convenient naming is index.html for the main website page. And in here, we're going to have to start typing away with all the boilerplate code. So I want you to pause the video and try this for yourself. If you remember, go ahead and start typing all the boilerplate code in here. Okay, now that you've completed that, let's go ahead and type it for ourselves. So let's type in doc type, and then I'm going to write HTML. And on the next line, I have to just specify HTML again. Oops, not like that. Let's just type that in fully. I don't want to do that. So HTML and then / HTML. And in here, I'm going to go ahead and start writing the head tag and the body tag. So we have head, and then I'm going to write my body tag. Like that. Before we continue, I just wanted to let you know there's a shortcut on writing tags. If you go ahead and write head and then press tab, the beginning tab will appear and the ending of the tag will appear. So I could just press enter and then I could go ahead and start typing my code away. But I've already created my head tag, so I don't need this. So let's go ahead and start writing our head tag code. So we have to write meta, so I'll write meta in here. And in this, I gotta write char set because I'm setting the character encoding type. And I'm gonna set this to UTF-8. So UTF/8. And finally, in here, I'm just gonna write title. And then remember, it's a pair tag, so I'd have to close this. So I'll write title again. And then in between this, I can write the title. I could write home for now. I could write homepage. You guys could call this whatever. This is what's going to appear, and I'll show you what I mean by this right now. So if I go ahead and press Control S, and you'll look at this dot up here. If I press Control S, the dot disappears. That means that we saved our code. But if I made a change, you'll see this dot appears. And basically what this means is that our code is not saved. So it's important that we keep pressing Control S. So how do we open this up in our browser? Well, we have a few options. The first option is to right click on this and then go down and copy full path. This one over here, not project path, full path. And now that we've copied the full path, I can bring in our browser tab and I can right click and I can click on paste. And if I press enter, we'll see it shows our home page. And we can see this is our home page. I'm just going to drag this to our right, and I'm just going to open this on the left. And I could prove this. I could even write my name. I could write GUNVAR/home. And if I press Control S, and I come here, nothing changes. But that's because I never reloaded my page. If I press the reload button right now, you'll see that it changes to my name/home. There's a few other methods. So the other method is that if we go ahead and open this up, and we just maximize this for now, and I double click on this index.html, it's going to open it up in another browser tab. But I don't like this method, as later on you'll realize it's not practical. So let's go ahead and put these side by side again. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this left project menu, or panel you could say, by pressing this little arrow key. So from here, let's go ahead and start adding our H1 tags, which are our header tags. So as a challenge, I want you to go ahead and add some header tag in between the body tags because we want it to appear on the screen. Okay, let's go ahead and add our header tags now. So I'm going to type in H1 and then press enter, and the H1 tag appears. I'm going to go ahead and write H2, and I'm going to repeat this process all the way up to H6. Now that I've added all these tags, let's take a look at why isn't it going below H6, or why is H6 the limit? Well, let's first go ahead and reload our page after we save this file. Remember that blue dot? We got to get rid of that. So we press Control S to save. And if we reload our page, nothing happens. That's because we have no text or nothing in between this. So I could write this, I could write test here, and I'm just going to repeat the process for all of these. And now that I've added it, I'm going to press Control S, and I'm going to go over here and press reload. So you may notice that I've added spaces. I'm just going to apply that for these last two just to show you that there is nothing that I'm doing wrong on this side. So if I go ahead back over onto our browser after saving our file, I'm going to reload it, and you'll notice nothing changed. And you may notice that test, which is H1, is the biggest, and H6, which is over here, is the smallest. So header tags are often used in titles. And in this scenario, we can see H1 is the biggest tag, and H6 is the smallest tag. And I'm going to go ahead and make a comment. And a comment is basically somewhere I could go ahead and start making notes for myself straight onto the document, which is super helpful. So if I go ahead and press Control /, you'll notice this appears. Or you can simply just type this out by doing this. It's a little bit more time consuming, but it does the same thing. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start adding comments. So the first comment is that H1, the H1 tag is the biggest tag, and the H6 tag is the smallest tag. Okay, and this way, anytime I open up this document or I need to have notes, I could just open up this file. Okay, now that we're back, we know how all these header tags work. So let's move on and skip the next few slides as we just discussed this. Okay, let's learn about what a paragraph tag is. A paragraph tag is the paired tag in which we can write tons of paragraphs in, so it displays text on the screen. There's one simple way of putting the paragraph tag in our HTML document, which is by having the opening tag and then the ending tag with a P in there. So let's go ahead and add this on our Atom document. Okay, now that we're in our document, I'm going to press P and I'm going to press enter. Now that these tags appeared, I'm going to go ahead and press enter again, and I can go ahead and start writing my text here. I'm going to go ahead and write gibberish. And as you may have noticed, that may have taken me a little too long. And if I go ahead and reload the page over here, you may notice it's basically not much. This took way too long to type. And I'm going to teach you a quick trick on writing paragraphs fast. So I'm going to go ahead and type in P again. And over here, what I'm going to do is type in lorem, and I'm going to press enter. And you may notice suddenly a lot of text appears. So this is some custom text. And basically, if I press Ctrl S and I reload the page on the browser, there is a lot of text now. And this is a fast way of writing a paragraph just for testing purposes. And as we can see, that the paragraph tag kind of looks similar to the title tag, but there is a difference. Let's go back and move on to the next tag. Let's move on to the next tag, which is a horizontal rule tag. The horizontal rule tag, also known as HR, is a singular tag. This tag helps us organize a website by making a thin horizontal line. For example, the line below, which is shown on the screen. There is one way of putting the HR tag into our document by simply just writing HR with the greater than and less than signs. Now that you know about the HR tag, can you replicate the image below? Okay, so here is the answer to that question. All we had to do is first create an H1 tag with coding is fun in between them, and then a paragraph with lorem a few times. Now let's move on to the center tag. The center tag is a paired tag. This tag helps us center all the text in between the web page. And there's basically one way of putting this onto the HTML document. It is simply by writing center, greater than, less than, and then center again with a /. So, as a challenge, can you replicate the image on the screen? Here is the answer. First, we have our center tag wrapping everything. And you may notice our center tag is over here, right there. And then we have one over here. And everything that's being displayed on our screen is in between the center tags. As you can see, there's an H1, horizontal rule, and paragraph. So this basically centers everything on the screen. Well, good job on completing that challenge. And congratulations on finishing this lesson.